Hello, I'm Mr. Pomfret and I teach philosophy at Saltash Community School. One of the first questions people ask is, what is philosophy? What does the word even mean? And as you can see on the slide, it breaks down quite nicely into what exactly it's meant to all be about. Loving knowledge, loving wisdom, trying to find out answers to some of humankind's biggest questions. That's basically what it is. With this A-level, we can't cover everything, of course, but we do cover some significant issues and questions that the pupils generally tend to really enjoy getting into. Another question that comes up quite quickly in any discussion about philosophy is, what use is this A-level? What do I need it for? Well, although there aren't loads and loads of degree courses that specify an A-level in philosophy, the A-level itself is what's called a supporting subject by many institutions. And the reason why it's a good supporting subject is because of the skills that it enables pupils to develop. We can't underestimate the usefulness of this when it comes to increasing someone's capacity to think outside of the box, to think laterally, to pick apart arguments, to weigh up what people say about some important questions, and tease out what really the issue is, and more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, what people think about those issues themselves. The qualification is a stepping stone into other things, but what it does do, it gives people a foundation for a way of thinking and a way of discussing that's going to be useful to them throughout their lifetime. There are lots and lots of jobs where people do use the skills of philosophy, perhaps without realising it, and some of those are listed at the bottom of the slide. Certainly, I would say that this is one of the most useful, the most helpful, and the most interesting A-levels out there. It is, it's fair to say, also one of the hardest ones to do and do well. That is something that I always tell pupils before they get involved in this. Let's be under no illusions. It is very, very difficult, but that difficulty brings with it an intense feeling of reward and success when things go right. And I would urge every pupil at this school to seriously consider thinking about doing this A-level. As well as teaching philosophy at the school, I'm also the head of religion and ethics. And with that in mind, I do feel duty bound to say very clearly that when I say that we do an A-level in philosophy at my school, it is an A-level in philosophy. There is only one exam board that does A-level philosophy, that's AQA. That is what this A-level is. It is not an A-level in religious studies. Lots of other institutions do call their A-level philosophy and ethics. That's because, for whatever reason, they like to impress upon pupils the philosophical element of their A-level. But it's a different A-level. And as great as it is, and it really is a good one, I've got to be honest, we do not do that A-level here. We do philosophy in a different way. As you can see from the slide, the subject matter in A-level religious studies is different. There are a lot of commonalities, but it is a different A-level. So just to be very clear as well, some pupils, when they investigate what they can do at sixth forms around in the area, sometimes religious studies gets labelled as some kind of philosophy, and whilst that's true that it is part of it, it is a different A-level from what we offer here. So what do we do? Well, the first thing that we do is epistemology, the study of knowledge. That's the basic building blocks of most kinds of philosophy, certainly the ones that we study here for this A-level. We start in the first half term of year 12 by asking the question, what is knowledge? And by asking that question, we then go on to the other ones that you can see on the slide here. This is something that is quite intense, quite deep, but actually is quite accessible. There's lots of hooks we use to enable the pupils to start thinking about these questions in a way that's not intimidating, certainly not daunting, and gets them stimulated when it comes to thinking in a philosophical way. To be clear, we have all of this for year 12. We have another section, of course, for the same year as well. We feel it's a good way to get into it by splitting it up. So we would study epistemology for the first half term, go on to what I'll show you next, and then come back to epistemology. So we would revisit these things and add more to our knowledge as we go through year 12. Just to give you an example of the kind of thing we study in year 12 in epistemology, we've got a classic investigation here into perception, and this can lead people down all sorts of rabbit holes when it comes to deciding, okay, what's real, what am I seeing, what am I experiencing, and if I'm not sure what those things are, can I really be sure of anything? It's quite a nice little way of messing with people's heads, really. So that's the kind of thing that we would be doing, and then we would take things from there. And when we get to year 13, as you'll see later, the kind of questions we're asking in year 12 do come back again, because these, as I said, these things underpin a lot of the philosophies we look at. It has to be said, we look at Western European based philosophy, not Eastern, anything Indian, for example, some amazing stuff from that part of the planet, but we're sticking with European stuff most of the time, and these are the kind of things that have exercised people back in the day and still to this day as well. So this is what we're going to be getting into at the beginning of the course. As I said, we spend the first half term of year 12 looking at epistemology, and then in October, November, we then switch to looking at normative ethical theories, utilitarianism, Immanuel Kant's deontology, and Aristotle's virtue ethics. We also look at applied ethics, how these ethical theories can be applied to the situations that you can see in front of you here, and also meta ethics. What is ethics? This gets quite interesting because we get into quite a lot of arguments about what's right and wrong and how we know, and how these philosophers can justify their views, and how we might actually have a lot in common with them and how other times we don't. It's quite clear that this is the bit of the course that tends to grab people perhaps a little bit more than epistemology. Once we've got past looking at pencils in glasses full of water and that kind of thing, one of the other things that excites people quite a lot is saying, okay, well, can we ever get to a point where we know that something is morally right and that everybody could know? Is there a way of getting to what we all agree is good? And these three ethical theories try to do that. To break it down quite simply, the three normative ethical theories that we look at for the main part of the ethical part of year 12 can be condensed into these three questions here. When we look at utilitarianism, we're saying to ourselves, okay, we want to make as many people as happy as possible, so how do we do that? And actually, is that really right in itself? We also ask the question, as Kant did, is there anything we can say about things being always wrong or always right, and how can we work that out? And then lastly, following Aristotle, we ask the question, okay, how do we become good? Is it a work in progress kind of situation, or do the other philosophers have better ideas about that? What does it mean to be good? Is it more about us as a person, or about what we do? So that's just a bit of a taste of what we do in year 12, and the next slide will sort of get right to it in the way that we engage people straight away with this kind of question. Year 13 follows a similar pattern to year 12, where we'll begin by looking at the metaphysics of God for the first half term, and then we switch to the next part of the course. So this is as close as we might get to RSA level, where we're asking the questions that you can see here, and we would be investigating this purely from the point of view of just God and what it means. We're not necessarily looking, or we won't be looking at religious points of view with this. We're just going to be looking at philosophical arguments for and against the existence of God, and if we can actually talk about something like God in a way that we all understand. So religious language is part of this. But like I said earlier, this is not an RSA level, and what we do here is we look at things in a slightly different way to what we might find elsewhere. This is probably the part of the A level that winds pupils up the most, apart from talking about George Berkeley and epistemology, because it just is something that's so present and so relevant today, but also is so hard to get into and to break down philosophically. are mental states the same as brain states? What does the brain do? What is the mind? Is there such a thing as a mind? When we talk, again, thinking about religious language a second ago, the language we use every day, the psychological, what does that actually mean? Will we get to a point where we don't need that language anymore when we talk about our mental state? So we do, briefly touch on psychology, and we talk about neuroscience a little bit as well. We also will be referring back to year 12 and epistemology, because again this comes down to what's real and how do we know. So these things have a way of coming back, and in quite a nice way, to refresh our memories and to inform us of how best we might tackle some of these massive questions. Very helpfully, this A-level has been around for a long time, and even though in the last few years there have been a couple of tweaks to it, there's a wealth of material online that can help pupils get into the topics in a different way from what we might encounter in lessons. One of the things that I've done to help pupils is to set up a Padlet Wall that they can all have access to, that outlines all of the things they need to know for this A-level, from the specification itself all the way through to some handy videos that condense some of the complex ideas that we study into 10 minutes or less. This is a really useful tool. A lot of the pupils, or some of the pupils in the past, have found it really useful, and the pupils that we've got this year who are studying A-level philosophy for the first time, they're finding it quite useful as well. I just wanted to say before I show you the very last slide that as much as we're mentioning some names that might be familiar, Kant, Aristotle and utilitarianism, one of the best things that's happened in the last couple of years with some of the changes is that there's more philosophers that are female and more philosophers that are still alive, which makes things a lot easier for people when they're reading texts, believe me. So hopefully all of the resources that we've got will help the pupils do the best they possibly can in this A-level, and hopefully they'll gain so much from it that will be beyond the grades that they get at the end as well. It's understandable that pupils and parents and carers want to know the likelihood of success for any A-level when a child takes something like this on, and we've had one year group so far at the school that have gone through this A-level. You can see their grades on the slide. The main takeaway from this, I would suggest, is that people can achieve very highly in this A-level at the school with the teaching that we provide. And as you can see, none of the people who did philosophy last time necessarily had to have an A-level in philosophy, but I think you can see quite clearly the links between A-level philosophy and what they might be studying. Certainly music might not seem much of a link there, but one of the things I look for in a pupil who's going to do philosophy, if they don't have RS GCSE, which a lot of them won't because it's an option here, if their English results are great, of course we look for that because they have to have a really good standard of literacy for this kind of A-level. But also if they've got the kind of brain that's musical or mathematical, the kind of people that enjoy design and technology, those kinds of subjects, they tend to have the kind of methodical approach that lends itself really well to this A-level. So I would say it's not just for people who might like RS a little bit, might be very good at English. There are other skills that people can bring to the table, and the more diverse the table is, the better the conversations. The better the conversations, the better we talk, the better people write, and the better people write, then the better results they'll get. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and you found it useful. If there's anything else you need to know, please contact me using the contact details on the very last slide. Thank you.